Welcome, weary traveller. Tonight, we journey into the depths of Hallownest, into the darkness beneath the kingdom, into the tragic and beautiful story of the vessels. This is a tale of gods and mortals, of desperate measures and unintended consequences, of hollow shells and the light that fills them. Let your breathing slow, let your muscles relax. Let the world above fade away as we descend together into the ancient kingdom, into the abyss, into the heart of one of gaming's most haunting and profound mythologies. The story of the vessels is not a simple one. It spans eons, involves beings of immense power, and touches on themes of sacrifice, identity, and the nature of consciousness itself. But we have all the time in the world tonight. There's no rush, no urgency, just the gentle unfolding of a story that has captivated millions. So close your eyes if you wish. Let my words paint pictures in your mind, and let the lore of the vessels carry you gently towards sleep. Before there was Hallownest, before there were kingdoms or kings, there was the void. Not emptiness, not nothing, but something else entirely. The void is a substance, a force, perhaps even a kind of consciousness that exists beneath all things, in the spaces between, in the darkness that light cannot reach. The void is ancient beyond measure. It predates the gods, predates the bugs who would build civilizations, predates perhaps even the concept of time itself. It simply is, and always has been, waiting in the depths, patient and eternal. What is the void? This question has no easy answer. It is darkness given form, absence given presence, nothing that is somehow something. It does not think as we think, does not feel as we feel, but it is not entirely without awareness. It responds to certain stimuli, can be shaped by certain forces, and has properties that can be harnessed by those with the knowledge and power to do so. The abyss, that great chasm beneath Hallownest, is where the void pools most densely. Here, in the deepest darkness, the void exists in its purest form. The air itself seems thick with it, and light struggles to penetrate. This is a place of primordial power, untouched by the civilizations that would rise above it. Into this world came the higher beings, entities of immense power, who existed on a plane above ordinary bugs. These were not gods in the traditional sense, not creators of the world, but beings who had transcended ordinary existence, who wielded powers that seemed divine to lesser creatures. The Radiance was among the oldest and most powerful of these beings. She was light itself given consciousness, a blazing moth deity whose brilliance could illuminate the darkest corners of existence. In the time before Hallownest, she was worshipped by the moth tribe, who basked in her glow and received her dreams. The Radiance's light was not merely physical illumination, it was a kind of consciousness, a shared dream that connected all who accepted it. The moths who worshipped her existed in a state of collective awareness, their individual minds linked through her radiance. They were never alone, never lost, never without guidance. But light casts shadows, and the Radiance's brilliance could be blinding. Her light demanded total acceptance, total surrender. Those who basked in her glow lost something of themselves, became extensions of her will rather than independent beings. This was not malice on her part, it was simply her nature. She was light, and light illuminates everything it touches, leaving no shadows, no secrets, no private spaces. From somewhere beyond Hallownest came the Pale King, a worm of a synth size and power who would transform everything he touched. His origins are mysterious, lost in the mists of time and deliberate obscurity. What we know is that he arrived, and nothing was ever the same. The Pale King was different from the Radiance in fundamental ways. Where she was light and dreams and collective consciousness, he was thought and individuality and the cold clarity of reason. His gift to those who followed him was not shared awareness but separate minds, the ability to think independently, to question, to choose. When the Pale King arrived in the land that would become Hallownest, he shed his worm form, transforming into something smaller but no less powerful. His cast-off shell became a landmark, a reminder of what he had been and what he had sacrificed to become something new. The bugs who encountered the Pale King were transformed by his presence. His light, pale and cool compared to the Radiance's blazing brilliance, awakened something in them. They began to think in new ways, to build and create and dream their own dreams rather than sharing in another's. This was the Pale King's gift and his curse. He gave the bugs of Hallownest individuality, but individuality brings isolation. He gave them the ability to think, but thought brings doubt. He gave them freedom, but freedom brings the burden of choice. The kingdom of Hallownest rose around the Pale King, a civilization of unprecedented sophistication and achievement. The bugs built cities and roads, developed arts and sciences, created wonders that would endure for ages. And at the centre of it all sat the Pale King on his white throne, guiding his people toward a future he believed would be glorious. As Hallownest grew and prospered under the Pale King's guidance, something was lost. The moths who had once worshipped the Radiance began to forget her. The Pale King's light was gentler, less demanding, and he offered something the Radiance could not: individual identity, personal dreams, private thoughts. One by one, the moths turned away from their ancient goddess. They stopped dreaming her dreams, stopped basking in her collective glow, stopped remembering her name. And as they forgot, the Radiance began to fade. For a being like the Radiance, being forgotten is a kind of death. Her power was tied to worship, to remembrance, to the minds that held her image. As those minds turned elsewhere, she diminished, her light growing dimmer, her presence growing weaker. But the Radiance did not simply accept her fate. She was ancient and proud, a goddess who had illuminated the world since before memory. She would not go quietly into oblivion. She would not be forgotten. From her diminished state, the Radiance reached out. She touched the dreams of the bugs who had forgotten her, reminding them of her existence, demanding their attention. But her touch was no longer gentle. Centuries of being ignored, of fading, of dying by inches had changed her. Her light, once nurturing, had become harsh. Her dreams had become nightmares. The infection began as whispers in dreams, as strange thoughts that didn't quite belong, as a creeping orange glow at the edges of consciousness. The bugs of Hallownest didn't understand what was happening at first. They only knew that something was wrong, that their minds were no longer entirely their own, that a foreign presence was growing within them. The infection spread slowly at first, then with increasing speed. Bugs who had lived peaceful, productive lives began to change. Their eyes took on an orange glow. Their movements became erratic, violent. They attacked friends and family, driven by impulses they couldn't understand or control. The Pale King watched his kingdom begin to crumble. Everything he had built, everything he had sacrificed for, was being destroyed by a force he couldn't fight with armies or walls or laws. The Radiance was attacking Hallownest through the minds of its citizens, and against such an assault, conventional defences were useless. The infection was not merely a disease of the body, it was a disease of the mind, of the soul, of the very consciousness that the Pale King had awakened in his subjects. The Radiance was reclaiming what she believed was hers, filling the minds that had forgotten her with her blazing, maddening light. Those fully consumed by the infection became husks, their individual identities burned away by the Radiance's brilliance. They moved and fought and existed, but they were no longer themselves. They were extensions of the Radiance's will, soldiers in her war against the king who had stolen her worshippers. The Pale King was desperate. He had given everything to build Hallownest, had transformed himself, had guided generations of bugs towards civilization and achievement. He could not simply watch it all be destroyed. He needed a solution, a way to stop the infection, a weapon against a god. And so he turned his brilliant, desperate mind toward the one force that might oppose the Radiance's light, the Void. The Pale King studied the Void with the intensity of a drowning man studying a rope. He needed to understand it, to harness it, to turn it into a weapon against the Radiance, and what he discovered was both promising and terrifying. The Void was the antithesis of the Radiance. Where she was light, it was darkness. Where she was thought and dream and consciousness, it was emptiness and silence and the absence of self. The Void could not be infected because there was nothing in it to infect. It had no mind for the Radiance to touch, no dreams for her to corrupt, no self for her to consume. This was the key. If the Pale King could create a being of pure void, a creature without thought or will or identity, that being could contain the Radiance. It could seal her away, trap her light within its emptiness, end the infection by imprisoning its source. But creating such a being was no simple matter. The Void was not easily shaped, not easily controlled. It resisted form, resisted purpose, resisted everything that would make it useful. The Pale King needed a vessel, a container that could hold the Void while remaining empty itself. He needed something hollow. The Pale King did not work alone in his desperate project. At his side was the White Lady, his queen, a being of root and growth and quiet power. She was ancient in her own right, a higher being who had chosen to bind herself to the Pale King and his kingdom. The White Lady's nature was fertility, growth, the endless proliferation of life. She could create, could nurture, could bring forth new beings from the union of her essence with another's. This power would be essential to the Pale King's plan. Together they conceived a terrible solution. They would create children, offspring born from the union of the Pale King's essence and the White Lady's fertility. But these would not be ordinary children. They would be vessels, containers designed to hold the Void, shells without souls meant to seal away a god. The White Lady agreed to this plan, though it must have cost her dearly. She was a being of life and growth, and she was being asked to create children who would never truly live, offspring who would be hollow by design. But the alternative was the destruction of everything, the consumption of all Hallownest by the Radiance's maddening light. The Abyss was chosen as the birthplace of the vessels for practical and symbolic reasons. Here, the Void was most concentrated, most accessible, most powerful. Here, in the absolute darkness, beings could be created that were truly empty, truly hollow, truly void. The Pale King constructed facilities in the Abyss, platforms and chambers where the work could be done. He studied the void, experimented with it, learned its properties and limitations. He developed techniques for shaping it, for binding it to physical forms, for creating creatures that were void given shape. The process was not gentle. The vessels were not born so much as forged, created through methods that combined the Pale King's power, the White Lady's fertility, and the raw substance of the void itself. Each vessel was a child of three parents: king, queen, and abyss. The eggs were cast into the void, allowed to gestate in that primordial darkness. What emerged were small, pale creatures with horned heads and empty eyes. They looked like children, moved like children, but they were not children in any ordinary sense. They were shells, containers, vessels waiting to be filled with purpose. Hundreds were created, perhaps thousands. The Pale King needed only one perfect vessel, one being that was truly hollow, truly empty, truly without self. But perfection is rare, and the void is unpredictable. Most of the vessels were flawed in some way, touched by some spark of consciousness, some hint of will, some trace of self. These imperfect vessels were discarded, cast back into the abyss to be consumed by the darkness that had birthed them. The Pale King could not afford sentiment. He could not afford to see these failed experiments as children. They were tools, and tools that didn't work were thrown away. Among all the vessels created, one seemed perfect. It was empty, hollow, without will or thought or dream. It looked up at the Pale King with eyes that held nothing, responded to commands without hesitation or question, showed no sign of the individual consciousness that would make it vulnerable to the radiance. This vessel was chosen. It was taken from the abyss, raised in the palace, trained for its purpose. It would become the Hollow Knight, the pure vessel, the container that would seal away the radiance and save Hallownest. The Pale King invested everything in this chosen vessel. He trained it, prepared it, shaped it for its destiny. He taught it to fight, to endure, to contain. He bound it with seals and chains, not of metal but of magic, designed to hold the radiance once she was trapped within. The Hollow Knight grew strong and skilled, a warrior without peer. It could defeat any enemy, endure any hardship, face any challenge. It was the perfect weapon, the perfect container, the perfect solution to Hallownest's desperate problem. Also, the Pale King believed. But the Hollow Knight was not perfect. Despite all the Pale King's efforts, despite all the careful design and ruthless selection, the chosen vessel had developed something it should not have: a sense of self. Perhaps it was the time spent with the Pale King, the training and attention that resembled a father's care. Perhaps it was something inherent in the vessel's nature, some spark that couldn't be extinguished. Perhaps the very act of being chosen, of being valued, of being given purpose, created the identity that should have been absent. Whatever the cause, the Hollow Knight was not truly hollow. Deep within its shell, hidden even from itself, was a tiny flame of consciousness, a whisper of will, a trace of self. This flaw was invisible, undetectable, but it was there, and it would prove fatal to the Pale King's plan. The Hollow Knight itself may not have known about this flaw. It believed itself to be what it was meant to be: empty, hollow, pure. It accepted its purpose without question, prepared to sacrifice itself to save the kingdom. If it felt anything about this fate, it buried those feelings so deep that even it couldn't find them. But the radiance would find them. When the time came, when the Hollow Knight was used to seal her away, she would sense that tiny flaw, that crack in the vessel's emptiness, and through that crack, she would eventually break free. The day came when the Hollow Knight was deemed ready. The infection had spread far, consuming more of Hallownest with each passing moment. The Pale King could wait no longer. His perfect vessel would face the radiance, would contain her light, would save the kingdom. The ritual took place in the Black Egg Temple, a structure built specifically for this purpose. Here, at the heart of Hallownest, the Hollow Knight would be sealed away with the radiance trapped inside it. The temple would serve as a second container, a backup seal in case the vessel's containment ever weakened. 3 dreamers were chosen to maintain the seals: Monomon the Teacher, Lurien the Watcher, and Hera the Beast. These 3 would enter an eternal sleep, their dreams forming barriers that would keep the Black Egg Temple closed, that would prevent anyone from reaching the Hollow Knight and potentially releasing the radiance. Each dreamer had their own reasons for accepting this fate. Monomon sought to preserve knowledge and protect her students. Lurien was devoted to the Pale King and would do anything to serve him. Hera bargained for something precious, a child born from her union with the Pale King, a daughter who would become known as Hornet. The ritual was performed. The radiance was drawn into the Hollow Knight, her blazing light contained within its empty shell. The dreamers entered their eternal sleep. The Black Egg Temple was sealed, and for a time it seemed that the Pale King's desperate plan had worked. Hallownest celebrated its salvation. The infection stopped spreading. The bugs who had been partially consumed began to recover. The kingdom that had seemed doomed was given a second chance. The Pale King was hailed as a saviour, a genius, a god who had defeated another god. His subjects worshipped him with renewed fervour, grateful for their deliverance, awed by his power and wisdom. Hallownest entered a golden age, a period of peace and prosperity that seemed like it would last forever. But the Pale King knew the truth. He knew that the Hollow Knight was not perfect, that the seal was not absolute, that the radiance was contained but not destroyed. He had bought time, perhaps centuries, but he had not achieved a permanent solution. This knowledge haunted him. He had sacrificed so much, had created and discarded countless vessels, had asked 3 beings to sleep forever, had done terrible things in the name of saving his kingdom, and all of it might be for nothing if the seal eventually failed. The Pale King became withdrawn, obsessed with finding a better solution, a way to truly destroy the radiance rather than merely contain her. He retreated to his white palace, surrounded himself with his most loyal servants, and worked on projects that he shared with no one. Meanwhile, the Hollow Knight hung in chains within the Black Egg Temple, the radiance burning inside it, the seal holding but slowly, imperceptibly weakening. What of the other vessels, the ones who were deemed imperfect and cast back into the abyss? Most were consumed by the void, their brief existences ending in the darkness that had birthed them. But not all. Some survived, some climbed, some refused to accept the fate that had been assigned to them. In the lightless depths of the abyss, vessels struggled against the void, fought to maintain their fragile existences, reached upward toward a world they had barely glimpsed. One vessel in particular would prove significant. Small and determined, it climbed through the darkness, past the remains of its countless siblings, toward the faint light above. It didn't know why it climbed, didn't understand what drove it. It simply moved, simply persisted, simply refused to die. This vessel would eventually escape the abyss. It would wander Hallownest, would leave the kingdom entirely, would spend years in the wastelands beyond, and then, drawn by forces it didn't understand, it would return. It would become the knight, the player character, the protagonist of Hollow Knight. Despite the apparent victory over the Radiance, Hallownest did not thrive forever. The Pale King's withdrawal left a void in leadership. The kingdom's institutions, built around his guidance, began to falter without his active involvement. The void, disturbed by the creation of the vessels, had become more active, more dangerous. Creatures emerged from the abyss, beings of living darkness that threatened the kingdom's lower regions. The Pale King's experiments had consequences that extended beyond the vessels themselves. The infection, though contained, was not entirely gone. Some bugs remained partially corrupted, their minds touched by the Radiance's light even after her imprisonment. These individuals were isolated, quarantined, but they served as reminders that the threat was not truly defeated. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, Hallownest began to decline. The great projects were abandoned. The roads fell into disrepair. The outlying regions were left to fend for themselves. The kingdom that had seemed eternal was beginning to die. What happened to the Pale King? This question haunts the lore of Hollow Knight, and the answer is never made entirely clear. We know that he retreated to his White Palace, that he became increasingly isolated, that he eventually disappeared entirely. Some believe he died, consumed by guilt over what he had done, unable to bear the weight of his choices. Others believe he fled, abandoning the kingdom he had built when he realized it was doomed. Still others believe he transcended, ascending to some higher plane of existence beyond mortal understanding. The White Palace itself vanished, shifted into the dream realm where it exists as a memory, a ghost, a puzzle for those who seek to understand the Pale King's final days. Within its twisted corridors, the evidence of his obsession remains: saw blades and spikes, challenges designed to test and torment, a path that leads to a fragment of his essence. Whatever his fate, the Pale King left Hallownest without its guiding light. The kingdom he had built, the civilization he had nurtured, the bugs he had awakened to consciousness, all were abandoned. His final gift to his people was absence, silence, the cold comfort of being left to face their doom alone. To understand the tragedy of the vessels, we must understand what they are. They are not ordinary bugs, not simple creatures born through natural processes. They are something else entirely, beings that exist at the intersection of multiple forces and natures. The vessels are children of the Pale King and the White Lady, carrying the essence of both higher beings. This gives them a connection to divinity, a potential for power that ordinary bugs lack. They are royalty in the truest sense, offspring of gods. But the vessels are also children of the void. They were born in the abyss, gestated in that primordial darkness, infused with the substance of emptiness itself. This void nature is what makes them potentially useful as containers for the radiance. It is also what makes them so alien, so difficult to understand. The combination of these natures creates beings of profound contradiction. They have the potential for consciousness, inherited from their divine parents, but they are designed to be empty, to suppress that consciousness, to be hollow. They are alive but meant to be without life, aware but meant to be without awareness. This contradiction is the source of both their tragedy and their potential. The vessels who develop consciousness, who become more than empty shells, are considered failures. But they are also the most interesting, the most sympathetic, the most human despite their inhuman nature. The void that fills the vessels is not merely absence, it is a substance with its own properties, its own behaviours, its own strange form of existence. Understanding the void helps us understand the vessels who carry it. The void is darkness, but not the darkness of mere shadow. It is a darkness that consumes light, that resists illumination, that exists as a positive force rather than a mere absence. When the void touches something, that something is changed, often destroyed, always transformed. The void is also emptiness, but not the emptiness of a vacant room. It is an emptiness that has weight, that has presence, that can be felt and feared. The void's emptiness is hungry, always seeking to expand, to consume, to make more of itself. Within the vessels, the void exists in a contained form. Their shells hold it, shape it, give it boundaries that it would not have. But the void is always pressing against those boundaries, always seeking release, always threatening to overflow. The vessel's connection to the void gives them certain abilities. They can manipulate void substance, can channel its power, can use it as a weapon against their enemies. The knight in particular develops numerous void-based abilities over the course of the game, learning to harness the darkness within. The central question of the vessel's existence is whether they can be truly hollow. The Pale King believed that a perfect vessel would have no consciousness, no will, no self. But is such a thing possible? Can a being exist without any form of awareness? The evidence suggests that true hollowness is impossible, or at least extremely rare. The Hollow Knight, chosen as the most perfect vessel, still developed a spark of self. The Knight, a discarded vessel, clearly has some form of consciousness, making choices, forming relationships, pursuing goals. Perhaps consciousness is inherent in existence itself. Perhaps any being complex enough to move and act and respond to its environment must have some form of awareness, however minimal. Perhaps the Pale King was chasing an impossibility, trying to create something that cannot exist. Or perhaps the vessel's consciousness came from their divine parentage, an inheritance that couldn't be suppressed no matter how hard the Pale King tried. The children of gods cannot be truly hollow, cannot be truly empty, cannot be truly without self. The vessels are siblings, all children of the same parents, all born from the same desperate project. This sibling relationship is one of the most poignant aspects of their story. In the abyss, the remains of countless vessels can be found. Small pale bodies, identical to the night, lie scattered across the darkness. These are the night's brothers and sisters, the failed experiments, the discarded children. Their presence is a constant reminder of the cost of the Pale King's plan. Some of these siblings still exist as shades, void beings that attack the night when encountered. Are these the ghosts of dead vessels, the remnants of consciousness that couldn't entirely be extinguished? Or are they something else, void creatures that merely resemble the vessels they once were? The knight's relationship with its siblings is complex. It fights them when necessary, absorbs their essence, uses their power. But there's also a sense of kinship, of shared tragedy, of beings who should have been family, but were instead rivals for a single position. The Hollow Knight is the knight's sibling too, the chosen one, the perfect vessel that the knight was deemed too flawed to be. The relationship between these two vessels is central to the game's story, a confrontation between siblings that is also a confrontation between different possible fates. The abyss, where the vessels were created, is one of the most significant locations in Hollow Knight. It is both birthplace and graveyard, the origin of the vessels and the final resting place of most of them. Descending into the abyss is a journey into darkness, into the past, into the heart of the vessel's tragedy. The light fades as you go deeper, replaced by a darkness that seems almost solid. The air grows thick with void, and the sense of ancient, patient power becomes overwhelming. At the bottom of the abyss lies the Sea of Void, a lake of living darkness that stretches beyond sight. This is where the vessels were born, where their eggs were cast, where they emerged into a world that had already decided most of them were worthless. The lighthouse that once illuminated the abyss stands dark and abandoned. Its light was extinguished long ago, perhaps deliberately, perhaps through neglect. Without it, the abyss is absolute darkness, a place where even the concept of light seems foreign. The knight's return to the abyss is a return to origins, a confrontation with the place and circumstances of its birth. Here, the knight can obtain the void heart, a charm that represents full acceptance of its void nature, full integration of the darkness within. This acceptance is necessary for the game's true ending, for the final confrontation with the radiance. The knight, our protagonist, is a vessel who escaped the abyss and left Hallownest entirely. For years, perhaps decades, it wandered the wastelands beyond the kingdom, existing without purpose, moving without destination. What did the knight do during this time? What did it experience? These questions are never answered. The knight's past is as empty as its nature, a blank space that the player fills with imagination. Perhaps it simply wandered, driven by instincts it didn't understand. Perhaps it had adventures we'll never know about. Perhaps it simply waited, hollow and patient, until something called it back. That call came eventually. Something drew the knight back to Hallownest, back to the kingdom of its birth, back to the tragedy it had escaped. Was it the weakening of the seals? Was it some connection to its siblings? Was it the void itself pulling its child home? The game never says, leaving the knight's motivation as mysterious as everything else about it. The knight enters Hallownest through Dirtmouth, a small town on the surface that serves as the gateway to the kingdom below. From here, it descends into the ruins of a once great civilization, into a world of infected bugs and ancient secrets, into a story that has been waiting for it to arrive. The knight never speaks. Throughout the entire game, it remains silent, communicating only through action. This silence is both a gameplay choice and a thematic statement about the nature of vessels. The knight's silence reflects its hollow nature. It has no voice because it has no self to express, no thoughts to communicate, no personality to reveal. It is empty, and emptiness is quiet. But the silence also creates space for the player. Without a defined personality, the knight becomes a vessel for the player's intentions, a shell that the player fills with their own motivations and interpretations. The knight's hollowness becomes the player's canvas. Other characters react to the knight's silence in various ways. Some find it unsettling, sensing something wrong about this small, quiet creature. Others project their own meanings onto it, seeing what they want to see in its empty eyes. The knight accepts all interpretations without confirming or denying any of them. The silence also emphasizes the knight's actions. Without words, only deeds matter. The knight is defined by what it does, not what it says. Its choices, its battles, its explorations, These are its only form of expression, its only way of existing in the world. As the knight explores Hallownest, it grows stronger. It finds new abilities, new weapons, new ways of navigating the world. This growth is both mechanical, serving gameplay purposes, and thematic, representing the knight's development as a being. The knight begins weak, armed only with a simple nail and basic movement abilities. It can barely survive the dangers of Hallownest, struggling against even minor enemies. But with each challenge overcome, each boss defeated, each upgrade obtained, it becomes more capable. Some of this growth comes from external sources, better nails, new spells, charms that modify abilities, but some comes from within, from the knight's connection to the void, from powers that were always latent but needed to be awakened. The void abilities are particularly significant. The knight learns to channel the darkness within, to use it as a weapon, to shape it according to its will. These abilities, like the Shade Cloak and the Void Heart, represent the knight embracing its nature, accepting what it is rather than fighting against it. This growth parallels the knight's journey toward its destiny. It is not just becoming stronger, it is becoming more fully itself, more completely what it was always meant to be. The hollow shell is being filled, not with consciousness or personality, but with purpose. To reach the Hollow Knight and potentially end the infection, the knight must first defeat the 3 dreamers who maintain the seals on the Black Egg Temple. Each dreamer represents a different aspect of Hallownest's tragedy, a different sacrifice made in the name of containing the radiance. Monomon the teacher was the kingdom's greatest scholar, a being devoted to knowledge and understanding. She created the archives, preserved Hallownest's learning, trained students who would carry that knowledge forward. Her decision to become a dreamer was motivated by a desire to protect her students and preserve what she had built. Lurien the Watcher was devoted to the Pale King, a loyal servant who would do anything for his master. He watched over the City of Tears from his spire, maintaining vigilance even in sleep. His sacrifice was an act of devotion, final service to the king he loved. Hera the Beast was Queen of Deepnest, a realm of spiders and darkness that existed uneasily within Hallownest. She agreed to become a dreamer in exchange for a child, a daughter born from her union with the Pale King. That daughter, Hornet, would become one of the most important characters in the game. Defeating the dreamers is necessary but tragic. These are not villains but victims, beings who sacrifice themselves for a cause they believed in. The knight must end their eternal sleep, must kill them in a sense to proceed with its mission. The moral weight of these actions is left for the player to consider. Hornet is the daughter of the Pale King and Hera, born as part of the bargain that made Hera a dreamer. She's not a vessel, not hollow, not filled with void. She's something else, a child of 2 higher beings who exists fully in the world. Hornet serves as a protector of Hallownest, a guardian who watches over the kingdom's secrets and challenges those who would disturb them. She encounters the knight multiple times, first as an enemy, then as something more complex. Her relationship with the knight is fascinating. They are half-siblings sharing the Pale King as a father, but they are also fundamentally different, one hollow and one full, one silent and one speaking, one void and one not. Hornet sees something in the knight, recognizes its potential, eventually comes to support its mission. Hornet's dialogue provides much of the game's exposition about the vessels and their purpose. She explains what the night is, what it was meant to be, what it might become. She serves as a bridge between the silent protagonist and the player, giving voice to truths that the night cannot speak. Her own story is tragic in its own way. She was born as a bargaining chip. Her existence the price of her mother's sacrifice. She has spent her life guarding a kingdom that is already dead, protecting secrets that may no longer matter. But she persists, because persistence is all she knows. Within the Black Egg Temple, the Hollow Knight hangs in chains, the radiance burning inside it. For centuries it has endured this torment, containing a god's fury within its supposedly empty shell. The Hollow Knight's existence since the sealing has been one of constant struggle. The radiance never stopped fighting, never stopped trying to break free, never stopped burning against the walls of her prison, and the Hollow Knight, despite its training, despite its purpose, despite everything, has felt every moment of that struggle. Because the Hollow Knight was not truly hollow. That tiny flaw, that spark of self that should not have existed, has been the Radiance's foothold. Through that crack in the vessel's emptiness, she's been working, eroding, breaking down the barriers that contain her. The Hollow Knight has been aware of this failure. It knows that it was not perfect, that it could not do what it was created to do, that its flaw is slowly dooming the kingdom it was meant to save. This knowledge is its own form of torment, guilt added to pain, failure added to suffering. When the knight finally reaches the Black Egg Temple and confronts the Hollow Knight, what it finds is a being broken by centuries of struggle. The Hollow Knight is still fighting, still trying to contain the radiance, but it is losing. The infection leaks from its wounds, orange light blazing from cracks in its shell. The fight against the Hollow Knight is not a simple boss battle. It is a confrontation between siblings, a mercy killing, an attempt to end suffering that has lasted far too long. The Hollow Knight fights with desperate fury, using skills it learned centuries ago in service of a king who abandoned it. It is still powerful, still dangerous, still capable of destroying the knight if given the chance, but it is also broken, its movements erratic, its attacks interrupted by moments of self-harm. Yes, the Hollow Knight hurts itself during the battle. It stabs itself with its own nail, trying to destroy the radiance within, trying to end its own torment, trying to do what it could not do through containment. These moments of self-destruction are among the most disturbing in the game, revealing the depth of the Hollow Knight's suffering. The knight must defeat its sibling, must break the shell that has contained the radiance for so long. This is not victory but tragedy, not triumph but necessity. The Hollow Knight, for all its flaws, tried its best. It endured centuries of torment in service of a purpose it believed in, and now it must die, killed by a sibling who was once deemed less worthy. When the Hollow Knight falls, the radiance is revealed. She emerges from the broken vessel, blazing with light that has been contained for far too long, furious and powerful and ready to reclaim what she believes is hers. The radiance is terrifying in her glory. She's a god, ancient and mighty, and her imprisonment has only made her angrier. She attacks with beams of light, with summoned swords, with all the power of a deity who has been wronged and wants revenge. This is the true final boss of Hollow Knight, the source of the infection, the enemy that the Pale King could only contain, never defeat. The knight must face her, must fight her, must somehow overcome a being of immense power, with nothing but a nail and the void within. The battle against the radiance takes place in the dream realm, in a space of pure light and fury. Here, the rules of the physical world don't apply. Here, only will and power matter. The night, small and silent and hollow, stands against a blazing god and refuses to yield. Hollow Knight offers multiple endings, each representing a different resolution to the conflict between void and light, between the night and the radiance, between the legacy of the Pale King and the vengeance of the forgotten god. In the simplest ending, the night takes the Hollow Knight's place. It becomes the new vessel, the new container for the radiance, the new prisoner in the Black Egg Temple. The cycle continues, the infection is contained again, but nothing is truly resolved. The night has simply delayed the inevitable, trading one flawed vessel for another. In another ending, the night defeats the radiance in the dream realm but is consumed in the process. The void claims both the night and the god, dragging them down into darkness. The infection ends, but so does the night's existence. It is a victory, but a costly one. In the true ending, achieved by obtaining the void heart and fully embracing the night's nature, something different happens. The night becomes one with the void, transforms into a being of pure darkness, and destroys the radiance utterly. The god of light is extinguished, consumed by the very emptiness she sought to fill. This true ending is the most complete resolution, the final defeat of the radiance, the end of the infection's source. But it comes at a cost. The night is gone, absorbed into the void, its individual existence ended. It has become something greater, or perhaps something less, a part of the darkness rather than a being in its own right. The story of the vessels is fundamentally about the cost of salvation. The Pale King wanted to save his kingdom, and he was willing to pay almost any price to do so. But the price he paid was measured in lives, in suffering, in the creation and destruction of countless children. The vessels were tools created for a purpose, discarded when they failed to serve that purpose. The Pale King did not see them as children, could not afford to see them that way. To him, they were experiments, attempts, iterations toward a goal. Their suffering, their deaths, their brief and tragic existences were acceptable costs, but were they? The game asks this question without providing an easy answer. The radiance was a genuine threat, and the infection would have destroyed Hallownest without intervention. The Pale King's plan, flawed as it was, did by centuries of relative peace. Was that worth the cost? The vessels themselves cannot answer this question. They were never asked, never consulted, never given a choice. They were created to serve and die, and most of them did exactly that. The few who survived, who developed consciousness, who became more than empty shells, are left to grapple with a purpose they never chose. The vessels raise profound questions about identity and consciousness. What makes a being a person? Is consciousness necessary for moral standing? Can something be truly empty, truly without self? The Pale King believed that true emptiness was possible and desirable. He sought to create beings without will, without thought, without any inner life that could be corrupted by the radiance. But his failure suggests that such emptiness may be impossible, that any being complex enough to act in the world must have some form of awareness. The Knight's journey can be read as an exploration of identity. It begins as an apparent blank, a silent protagonist without obvious personality or motivation. But through its actions, through its choices, through its relationships with other characters, it develops a kind of identity. It becomes someone, even if that someone is never clearly defined. The Hollow Knight's tragedy is the tragedy of denied identity. It developed a self but was not allowed to express it, was forced to suppress it, was punished for having it. Its centuries of torment were caused by a spark of consciousness that should have been celebrated but was instead seen as a flaw. The relationship between the Pale King and his vessel children is one of the most disturbing aspects of the lore. He created them, but he did not love them. He used them, but he did not value them. He was their father, but he was also their executioner. The Pale King's failure as a parent reflects his failure as a king. He was so focused on saving his kingdom that he lost sight of what made it worth saving. He sacrificed his children for his subjects, but in doing so, he revealed a coldness at the heart of his rule. The White Lady's role is more ambiguous. She participated in the creation of the vessels, provided the fertility that made them possible. But she also seems to have felt something for them, to have mourned their fate in ways the Pale King did not. Her self-imposed isolation, her binding with roots to prevent further reproduction, suggest guilt and grief. Hornet represents a different kind of parent-child relationship. She was born from a bargain, her existence the price of her mother's sacrifice. But she was also loved, raised, given a purpose that was her own rather than imposed. She is what the vessels might have been if they had been treated as children rather than tools. The conflict between the radiance and the void is a conflict between light and darkness, but not in the simple moral sense those terms usually imply. Neither light nor darkness is purely good or evil in Hollow Knight. Both have their virtues and their dangers. The radiance's light represents connection, shared consciousness, collective existence. Under her influence, beings are never alone, never lost, never without guidance. But her light also consumes individuality, burns away the self, leaves nothing but extensions of her will. The void's darkness represents emptiness, absence, the negation of self. It offers freedom from the radiance's consuming light, protection from her infectious dreams, but it also offers nothing positive, no meaning, no purpose, no existence beyond mere being. The Pale King tried to use darkness against light, to weaponize emptiness against consciousness, but his solution was flawed because it denied the value of both. He wanted beings that were neither light nor dark, neither full nor empty, but simply hollow. Such beings, if they could exist, would have no stake in the conflict, no reason to care about its outcome. The Knight's journey suggests a different possibility, integration rather than opposition. By embracing its void nature fully, by accepting the darkness within, the Knight becomes capable of defeating the radiance, not by being empty, but by being something new, something that contains darkness without being consumed by it. Both the Radiance and the Pale King are gods, higher beings of immense power, and both fail in different ways to achieve their goals or protect their followers. The Radiance fails because she cannot accept being forgotten. Her response to diminishment is rage, infection, the destruction of the very being she once nurtured. She becomes a monster because she cannot accept change, cannot adapt to a world that no longer needs her. The Pale King fails because he cannot accept imperfection. His plan required a perfect vessel, and when perfection proved impossible, the plan was doomed. He could not adapt, could not find another way, could not accept that his brilliant solution had a fatal flaw. Both gods are undone by their own natures. The Radiance is light, and light must illuminate. She cannot simply fade away. The Pale King is thought, and thought demands solutions. He cannot simply accept problems. Their virtues become their vices, their strengths become their weaknesses. The Knight, by contrast, succeeds because it has no fixed nature to be undone by. It is hollow, adaptable, capable of becoming what the situation requires. It can embrace the void without being consumed by it, can face the radiance without being infected by her. Its emptiness, paradoxically, is its greatest strength. Hollow Knight is deeply concerned with cycles, with patterns that repeat, with endings that become beginnings. The infection has happened before and will happen again. The ceiling is temporary, always temporary. The vessels are created and destroyed in an endless attempt to solve an unsolvable problem. The different endings represent different relationships to these cycles. The simplest ending continues the cycle, replacing one vessel with another, delaying the problem without solving it. The Knight becomes the new Hollow Knight, and eventually it too will fail. The true ending breaks the cycle by destroying its source. With the radiance gone, truly gone, the infection cannot return. The pattern is broken, the cycle is ended, something genuinely new can begin. But breaking cycles has costs. The Knight is lost, absorbed into the void, its individual existence ended. The Radiance, for all her faults, was a being of immense age and power, and her destruction diminishes the world. Endings are not purely positive, they are also losses, closures, the death of possibilities. The game leaves players to decide which ending they prefer, which relationship to cycles they find most meaningful. Some prefer the continuation, the sense that the story goes on even after the game ends. Others prefer the true ending, the sense of completion and resolution. Neither is wrong. Both are valid responses to the game's themes. The vessels can be interpreted as symbols, representations of ideas and experiences that extend beyond the game's narrative. The vessels as children of trauma, created by parents who couldn't love them, designed to suppress their own consciousness, discarded when they failed to meet impossible standards. This reading connects to experiences of childhood neglect, of being valued only for usefulness, of having one's inner life denied or dismissed. The vessels as workers under capitalism, created to serve a purpose, valued only for their function, disposed of when they're no longer useful. This reading connects to experiences of labour exploitation, of being treated as tools rather than people, of having one's humanity subordinated to productivity. The vessels as the marginalised, denied voice, denied agency, denied recognition of their consciousness. This reading connects to experiences of oppression, of being told that your inner life doesn't matter, of having your personhood questioned or denied. The vessels as all of us, struggling to find meaning in a world that didn't ask for our input, trying to develop identity in circumstances we didn't choose, seeking purpose in existence that often seems purposeless. This reading connects to universal human experiences of meaning-making and self-creation. The vessels were created with a purpose, to contain the radiance. This purpose defined their existence, determined their value, shaped everything about them. But what happens when purpose fails? What happens when the thing you were made for proves impossible? The Hollow Knight's tragedy is the tragedy of failed purpose. It was created to be perfect, to be hollow, to contain a god. It tried its best, endured centuries of torment, never stopped fighting, but it wasn't perfect, couldn't be perfect, and its imperfection doomed everything. The knight's journey offers a different relationship to purpose. It wasn't chosen, wasn't deemed worthy, wasn't given a destiny. It escaped, wandered, returned for reasons it may not understand. Its purpose, if it has one, is self-created rather than imposed. This contrast suggests something important about meaning and purpose. Imposed purposes can fail, can prove impossible, can become prisons. Self-created purposes, while perhaps less grand, are more flexible, more adaptable, more truly one's own. The vessel's tragedy is not just that they suffered, but that they suffered for a purpose they never chose, in service of a plan they never understood, for a kingdom that never acknowledged them as persons. Their story is a warning about the dangers of instrumental thinking, of treating beings as means rather than ends. The vessels were designed to be empty, but emptiness proved impossible. Even the Hollow Knight, the most perfect vessel, developed a spark of self. This failure suggests something important about the nature of consciousness and existence. Perhaps true emptiness is impossible for any being complex enough to act in the world. Perhaps consciousness emerges inevitably from sufficient complexity, regardless of design or intention. Perhaps the Pale King was chasing a contradiction, trying to create beings that were and were not at the same time. Or perhaps the vessel's consciousness came from their divine parentage, an inheritance that couldn't be suppressed no matter how hard the Pale King tried. The children of gods cannot be truly hollow, cannot be truly empty, cannot be truly without self. The knight's journey can be read as a movement from emptiness toward fullness, from hollow shell toward something more. Through its experiences, its choices, its relationships, it develops a kind of identity, becomes a kind of person. The emptiness that was supposed to define it becomes a space to be filled. This reading offers hope. If even a vessel designed to be empty can develop consciousness and meaning, then perhaps emptiness is never final, never absolute, never the last word. Perhaps fullness is always possible, always waiting, always ready to emerge. Do the vessel's lives have value? This question haunts the lore, and different answers lead to different interpretations of the story. The Pale King seemed to believe that the vessel's lives had no intrinsic value. They were tools, means to an end, valuable only insofar as they served their purpose. The countless vessels discarded in the abyss were acceptable losses, costs of doing business, necessary sacrifices. But the game itself seems to disagree. The vessels are presented sympathetically, their suffering acknowledged, their brief existence is treated as tragic rather than trivial. The knight's journey matters, the Hollow Knight's torment matters, the siblings' deaths matter. This tension between the Pale King's view and the game's presentation is intentional. It invites players to consider questions of value, of personhood, of what makes a life worth living. It challenges the instrumental thinking that treats beings as tools and asks us to see them as ends in themselves. The vessel's lives have value because all lives have value, because consciousness matters wherever it appears, because suffering is bad and flourishing is good regardless of who experiences them. This is the game's implicit argument, made not through dialogue but through design, through the way it presents its characters and their stories. What will be remembered of the vessels? When Hallownest is truly gone, when even its ruins have crumbled to dust, what legacy will remain? The vessels were never meant to be remembered. They were tools, disposable, interchangeable. The Pale King didn't name them. didn't record their existences, didn't create monuments to their sacrifice. They were supposed to serve and be forgotten. But the knight's journey creates a kind of memory. By exploring Hallownest, by uncovering its secrets, by confronting its tragedies, the knight bears witness to what happened. Even if no one else ever knows, the knight knows. The vessels are remembered by one of their own. The game itself is another form of memory. Millions of players have experienced the vessel's story, have felt sympathy for their plight, have carried their tragedy in their minds. The vessels, fictional though they are, have achieved a kind of immortality through the game that tells their story. And perhaps that's enough. Perhaps being remembered, being witnessed, being known is a form of meaning that transcends the circumstances of one's existence. The vessels were created to be forgotten, but they have been remembered. That's a kind of victory, a kind of redemption, a kind of peace. Despite its tragedy, Hallownest is beautiful. The game's art direction creates a world of haunting loveliness, of melancholy grandeur, of decay that is somehow gorgeous. Let's take a moment to appreciate this beauty, to let it wash over us as we drift towards sleep. This city of tears is perhaps the most beautiful location in the game. Rain falls eternally from the lake above, creating a constant gentle sound, a white noise of water on stone. The buildings are grand but empty, their windows dark, their doors closed. It's a city of ghosts, but the ghosts are quiet, peaceful, content to let the rain fall. The green path is lush and verdant, a contrast to the stone and darkness of other regions. Plants grow everywhere, reaching toward light sources, creating a canopy of green. The air feels fresh here, alive, full of the quiet energy of growing things. The resting grounds are solemn but not sad. Here, the dead of Hallownest lie in peace, their graves tended by spirits who remember them. The atmosphere is one of acceptance, of endings that are not tragedies but natural conclusions. The dead rest, and the living remember. Even the abyss has its own dark beauty. The absolute darkness, the sense of ancient power, the knowledge that you are in the presence of something primordial and vast. It's terrifying, but it's also awe-inspiring, a reminder of forces that exist beyond ordinary understanding. Hollow Knight's sound design is exceptional, creating an atmosphere that enhances every location and moment. Let's listen in our imagination to the sounds of Hallownest. The city of tears has its eternal rain, a gentle patter that never stops, that becomes a kind of music after a while. Beneath the rain, there's silence, the absence of the voices and footsteps that once filled these streets. It's peaceful in its way, a silence that invites contemplation. The green path has the sounds of nature, rustling leaves, distant water, the occasional call of creatures going about their lives. It's a living soundscape full of small noises that together create a sense of vitality and growth. The crystal peak rings with the echoes of old mining operations, pickaxes on stone, carts on rails, sounds that have faded but somehow still resonate. The crystals themselves seem to hum, a frequency just below hearing, a vibration felt more than heard. The abyss is silent in a way that other places are not. It's not just the absence of sound, it's the presence of silence, a positive quality that presses against the ears. In the abyss, even your own heartbeat seems muffled, absorbed by the darkness. Even in a game about infection and conflict, there are moments of peace. Let's remember some of these moments. Let them calm our minds as we prepare for sleep. Sitting on a bench in the city of tears, watching the rain fall, listening to its gentle rhythm. There's no urgency here, no enemies nearby, just the rain and the silence and the sense of being in a place that was once great and is now at rest. Resting at a hot spring, feeling the warmth seep into tired limbs, watching the steam rise. The night doesn't need rest in a biological sense, but there's something soothing about these moments anyway. A pause in the journey, a chance to simply be. Listening to the music in Dartmouth, the simple melody that plays in this small town above the kingdom. It's melancholy but not sad, a tune that speaks of endings and beginnings, of journeys completed and journeys yet to come. Watching the void sea in the abyss, that endless expanse of darkness that stretches beyond sight. It's terrifying, but it's also peaceful in its way, a reminder that some things are beyond understanding, beyond control, beyond worry. The night doesn't sleep, doesn't dream, doesn't rest in the way that living beings do. But perhaps, in its own way, it finds moments of peace. When the night sits on a bench, what does it experience? We can't know for certain, but perhaps there's something like rest, something like the quieting of whatever passes for its mind. The constant movement stops, the endless exploration pauses, and for a moment there's stillness. When the night gazes out over Hallownest from a high vantage point, what does it see? The ruined kingdom, yes, but perhaps also beauty, perhaps also wonder, perhaps also something that its hollow nature can appreciate even without fully understanding. When the night completes its journey, whatever ending it achieves, perhaps there's something like satisfaction. Not happiness, not joy, but the sense of a purpose fulfilled, a task completed, a story brought to its conclusion. The night's existence is strange and sad, but it's not without its moments of peace. Even a hollow being can find rest, can find stillness, can find something like contentment in the spaces between action. And now, as we near the end of our journey through the lore of the vessels, let's allow ourselves to drift towards sleep. The story has been told, the themes have been explored, the beauty has been appreciated. Now it's time to rest. Imagine yourself in Hallownest, but not in danger, not in conflict. Imagine yourself in one of those peaceful moments, sitting on a bench, listening to the rain, watching the world go by. There's nothing to do, nowhere to be, no enemies to fight. Just peace. The vessel's story is tragic, but tragedy can be restful in its own way. It reminds us that all things end, that all struggles conclude, that even the greatest conflicts eventually find resolution. There's comfort in endings, in the knowledge that nothing lasts forever. The night's journey is over, or will be soon. It has faced gods and monsters, has explored the depths of a ruined kingdom, has confronted its own nature and origins. Whatever end it achieves, its story will be complete, and completion is a kind of peace. So let your eyes close, let your breathing slow, let the story of the vessels carry you gently into dreams. The void is patient, the kingdom is quiet, and sleep is waiting. Rest now, traveller, you've earned it. We have journeyed through the complete lore of the vessels, from the age of void to the fall of Hallownest, from the Pale King's desperate plan to the night's final confrontation with the Radiance. It had been a long journey, full of tragedy and beauty, of questions and mysteries, of darkness and light. The vessels were children of gods and void, created to be empty, designed to contain a threat that could not otherwise be stopped. Most were discarded, deemed imperfect, cast back into the darkness that birthed them. One was chosen, trained, sealed away with a god burning inside it, and one escaped, wandered, returned to face a destiny it never chose. The story of the vessels is sad, but it's also beautiful. It speaks to universal experiences of purpose and meaning, of identity and consciousness, of the value of existence itself. It asks hard questions and doesn't provide easy answers. It invites interpretation, speculation, personal meaning-making. And now the story is told, the lore has been explored, the themes has been examined, the mysteries have been contemplated. What remains is rest, peace, the gentle drift towards sleep. Imagine yourself as the night, sitting on a bench in the city of tears. The rain falls gently, a constant soft sound that fills the silence. The city around you is empty but not lonely. It's peaceful, at rest, content to let time pass. You have fought many battles, explored many places, uncovered many secrets. But now, in this moment, there's nothing to do. No enemies approach, no puzzles demand solving, no paths call for exploration. There's just the rain, the bench, the quiet. Your hollow nature, which once seemed like a curse, now feels like a gift. You don't need to think, don't need to feel, don't need to struggle with the weight of consciousness. You can simply be, simply exist, simply rest. The void within you is calm, settled, at peace. It doesn't press against your shell, doesn't demand release, doesn't hunger for anything. It's content in its own strange way to simply be contained, to simply exist within you. The rain continues to fall, the city continues to sleep, and you continue to sit, hollow and peaceful, empty and full, nothing and everything. And so we come to the end. The lore of the vessels has been told, the story has been shared, the journey has been completed. Now it's time for rest, for sleep, for the gentle surrender to dreams. Let the story fade, let the details blur, let the lore become a soft background hum rather than a sharp focus. You don't need to remember everything, don't need to hold on to every detail. The story will be here when you wake, waiting patiently, ready to be revisited. For now, there's only rest, only peace, only the slow drift towards sleep. The vessel's story is tragic, but tragedy can be restful. It reminds us that all things end, that all struggles conclude, that even the greatest conflicts eventually find resolution. There's comfort in endings, in completion, in the knowledge that stories have conclusions. Your story today is concluding too, at least for now. The day is ending, consciousness is fading, sleep is approaching. Let it come. Let it wash over you like the rain in the city of tears, gentle and constant and peaceful. Good night, little ghost. Good night, traveller. Good night, dreamer. The void is patient, the kingdom is quiet, and sleep is waiting. Rest now. You've earned it. The vessels of Hollow Night resonate with players because they touch on something universal. They are beings created for a purpose they never chose, struggling with identities imposed upon them, seeking meaning in circumstances beyond their control. In this, they mirror the human condition. We're all, in some sense, vessels. We're born into bodies we didn't choose, into families and societies and circumstances that shape us before we can shape ourselves. We carry within us influences and inheritances, traumas and gifts, darkness and light that we didn't ask for but must somehow integrate. The night's journey is our journey, the struggle to understand what we are, to accept what we cannot change, to find meaning and purpose in existence that often seems meaningless. The night doesn't speak, doesn't explain itself, doesn't justify its choices. It simply acts, moves forward, faces what must be faced. This is what we do too. We wake each day and face our challenges, fight our battles, explore our worlds. We don't always understand why, don't always know where we're going, don't always feel confident in our choices. But we move forward anyway, because that's what living things do. The vessels teach us that emptiness is not the end, that even beings designed to be hollow can find purpose, can make choices, can matter. That the darkness within us is not our enemy but part of our nature, something to be integrated rather than feared. And they teach us that endings, even sad ones, have their own kind of peace, that stories conclude, struggles cease, conflicts resolve, that rest comes eventually for all of us, and that rest is not defeat but completion. So rest now, knowing that your story continues tomorrow. Rest now, knowing that the struggles of today will give way to the peace of tonight. Rest now, knowing that you, like the night, are more than you seem, capable of more than you know, worthy of the peace you seek. The void is patient, the kingdom is quiet, sleep is waiting, and you are ready. Good night. No cost too great, no mind to think, no will to break, no voice to cry suffering, born of God and void. You shall seal the blinding light that plagues their dreams. You are the vessel, you are the hollow night. Sleep well, traveller, the abyss remembers you. Let us delve deeper into how the vessels were actually created, the process by which the Pale King and White Lady brought these beings into existence. Understanding this process helps us appreciate both the ambition and the horror of what was attempted. The creation of a vessel required three elements: the essence of the Pale King, the fertility of the White Lady, and the substance of the void. These three forces had to be combined in precise ways, balanced against each other, shaped into something that could exist as a coherent being. The Pale King's essence provided the template, the basic form that the vessels would take. His nature as a higher being gave them the potential for power, for action, for existence beyond mere matter. Without his contribution, the vessels would have been nothing but void, formless and purposeless. The White Lady's fertility provided the spark of life, the animating force that allowed the vessels to move and act. Her nature as a being of growth gave them the ability to develop, to change, to become more than they were at the moment of creation. Without her contribution, the vessels would have been static, unchanging, unable to fulfill their purpose. The void provided the substance, the material from which the vessels were made. It filled them, defined them, gave them their essential nature as empty containers. Without the void, the vessels would have been ordinary children, conscious and willful, useless for containing the radiance. The eggs that resulted from this union were cast into the abyss, allowed to gestate in that primordial darkness. The void seeped into them, filled them, became part of their very being. When they hatched, they emerged as vessels, small, pale, hollow, ready to be tested. Not every vessel that emerged from the abyss was suitable for the Pale King's purpose. Most were flawed in some way, touched by consciousness, marked by will, unsuitable for containing a god. These had to be identified and removed. The testing process was brutal in its efficiency. The vessels were observed, evaluated, subjected to trials designed to reveal any trace of self. Those who showed emotion, who hesitated, who seemed to think or feel were deemed failures. Those who remained perfectly empty, perfectly obedient, perfectly hollow, were considered for further development. The failed vessels were returned to the abyss, cast back into the darkness that had birthed them. Most did not survive this return. The void consumed them, reclaimed them, unmade them. Their brief existences ended in the same darkness where they began. Some, however, survived. Some climbed, struggled, refused to accept their fate. The knight was one of these survivors, a failed vessel who escaped the abyss and eventually left Hallownest entirely. How many others escaped? The game doesn't say, but the possibility haunts the lore. The Hollow Knight passed every test. It showed no emotion, no hesitation, no sign of inner life. It obeyed perfectly, responded instantly, seemed to be exactly what the Pale King needed. It was chosen, elevated, prepared for its destiny. But the tests were imperfect. They could detect obvious consciousness but not subtle traces, clear emotion but not hidden feeling. The Hollow Knight's flaw, that tiny spark of self, was too small to be detected, too deep to be revealed. The tests passed it, and the kingdom's fate was sealed. The chosen vessel, the one who would become the Hollow Knight, was not simply sealed away immediately. It was trained, prepared, shaped for its purpose over what may have been years or decades. The Pale King himself oversaw this training. He taught the Hollow Knight to fight, to endure, to contain. He bound it with seals and chains of magic, prepared it to hold the Radiance's fury. He invested everything in this one vessel, this one hope for his kingdom's salvation. The training was rigorous, demanding, perhaps cruel. The Hollow Knight was pushed to its limits, tested against the strongest opponents, subjected to conditions designed to break any ordinary being. It endured everything, showed no weakness, seemed to be exactly what was needed. But the training may have been part of the problem. The attention, the investment, the sense of being valued and important, these may have contributed to the Hollow Knight's development of self. A being that is treated as significant may come to feel significant. A being that is cared for may come to feel cared about. The Pale King, in trying to create the perfect vessel, may have inadvertently corrupted it. His very investment in the Hollow Knight's success may have given it the sense of self that would eventually doom the plan. The father's love, however cold and instrumental, may have been the flaw that destroyed everything. The day of the sealing was the culmination of everything the Pale King had worked toward. The Hollow Knight was ready, the dreamers were prepared, the Black Egg Temple was complete. All that remained was to draw the Radiance into the vessel and seal her away. This ceremony took place in the heart of the temple, in a chamber designed specifically for this purpose. The Hollow Knight stood at the center, chains of magic binding it in place, seals of power surrounding it. The dreamers took their positions, ready to enter their eternal sleep. The radiance was drawn from the infected, pulled from the dreams she had corrupted, concentrated into a single blazing point of light. She fought, of course, resisted with all her ancient power. But the Pale King's preparations were thorough, his magic was strong, and she was pulled inexorably toward the waiting vessel. The moment of sealing must have been terrible. The Radiance's fury compressed into the Hollow Knight's shell, burning against walls that were supposed to be empty. The Hollow Knight's silent endurance, containing a god's rage without expression or complaint. The dreamers' descent into sleep, their consciousness fading as they became living locks on the temple's door. And then it was done. The radiance was contained, the infection was stopped, the kingdom was saved. The Pale King had succeeded, or so it seemed. The cost had been terrible, but the result was worth it. Hallownest would survive, for a while. For centuries the Hollow Knight hung in chains within the Black Egg Temple, the radiance burning inside it. This was not a static imprisonment, but a constant struggle. A war fought in silence and darkness, a battle that never ended. The radiance never stopped fighting. She pressed against the walls of her prison, sought weaknesses, exploited any crack she could find. Her light burned against the void that contained her. Her will pushed against the emptiness that held her. She was patient, as gods are patient, but she was also relentless. The Hollow Knight endured. It had been trained for this, prepared for this, created for this. It held the radiance through sheer will, through the discipline instilled by the Pale King, through a determination that should not have existed in a truly hollow being. But the Hollow Knight was not truly hollow, and that flaw slowly widened. The radiance found the crack, the tiny spark of self that should not have been there. She worked at it, expanded it, used it as a foothold. Slowly, imperceptibly, she began to break free. The infection started to leak. Orange light seeped from the Hollow Knight's wounds, spread through the temple, began to touch the world outside. The seals held, but they were weakening. The dreamers slept, but their dreams were troubled. The containment was failing. By the time the night returns to Hallownest, the Hollow Knight is barely holding on. Centuries of struggle have broken it, cracked its shell, pushed it to the edge of collapse. It still fights, still contains, still endures, but it cannot last much longer. The radiance is almost free. What caused the night to return to Hallownest? This question is never directly answered, but we can speculate based on what we know about the vessels and their connection to the void. The night had been wandering the wastelands beyond Hallownest for years, perhaps decades. It moved without apparent purpose, existed without clear motivation, simply was. Its hollow nature meant it didn't need food or rest, didn't seek companionship or comfort. It just wandered. But something changed. Something called the night back, drew it toward the kingdom of its birth, pulled it into the story that had been waiting for it. What was this call? Perhaps it was the weakening of the seals. As the Hollow Knight's containment failed, as the radiance began to break free, perhaps some signal went out, some summons that only vessels could hear. The night, connected to the void and to its siblings, may have felt this call and responded. Perhaps it was the void itself, the collective consciousness of the abyss, if such a thing exists, may have recognized that its champion was failing and summoned a replacement. The night, as a surviving vessel, was a potential new container, a possible solution to the crisis. Perhaps it was something simpler: instinct, fate, coincidence. The night wandered, and its wandering eventually brought it back to Hallownest. No grand purpose, no cosmic summons, just the random movements of a hollow being that happened to lead it home. Whatever the cause, the night returned. It descended into Hallownest, began to explore, began to grow stronger. It didn't know its purpose, didn't understand its destiny, but it moved forward anyway, driven by something it couldn't name. The night's journey through Hallownest can be seen as a path toward understanding and accepting its nature. Each region explored, each boss defeated, each ability gained brings the night closer to what it truly is. In the early game, the night is weak and ignorant. It doesn't know what it is, doesn't understand the kingdom it's exploring, doesn't grasp the significance of what it encounters. It simply moves forward, fights what attacks it, collects what it finds. As the game progresses, the knight learns. It discovers the history of Hallownest, the nature of the infection, the story of the vessels. It meets characters who explain, who hint, who reveal pieces of the puzzle. Slowly the picture comes together. The knight also grows stronger, not just in gameplay terms, but in its connection to its own nature. The void abilities it develops represent increasing integration with the darkness within. The shade cloak, the abyss shriek, the void heart. Each of these marks a step toward full acceptance of what the knight is. The journey culminates in the abyss, where the knight confronts its origins directly. Here, surrounded by the remains of its siblings, immersed in the void that birthed it, the knight can obtain the void heart and achieve full integration. It becomes not just a vessel, but a master of the void, capable of wielding the darkness as a weapon against the light. Throughout the knight's journey, the presence of its siblings is felt. They appear as shades in the abyss, as memories in the dream realm, as a constant reminder of the cost of the Pale King's plan. These siblings are tragic figures, beings who never had a chance. They were created, tested, found wanting and destroyed. Their brief existences were defined entirely by their failure to meet an impossible standard. They never knew anything but the abyss, never experienced the world above, never had the opportunity to become anything. The knight's relationship with its siblings is complex. It fights them when necessary, absorbs their essence, uses their power. But there's also kinship, recognition, a sense of shared tragedy. The knight is one of them, different only in that it escaped, that it survived, that it was given a chance they were denied. The void heart changes this relationship. With it equipped, these siblings become peaceful, no longer attacking the knight. They recognize it as family, as one of their own, as a being that has accepted what they all share. This piece suggests that the siblings retain some form of awareness, some ability to recognize and respond to kinship. In the true ending, the siblings play a crucial role. They emerge from the night, joining in the final assault on the radiance, helping to drag her down into the void. In this moment, the discarded children become instruments of victory. Their deaths, their suffering, their brief and tragic existences finally serve a purpose. They help destroy the god who caused so much suffering, and in doing so they achieve a kind of redemption. What does it mean to defeat the radiance? What kind of victory is achieved in the true ending? These questions deserve careful consideration. The radiance is destroyed, consumed by the void, her light extinguished forever. This is a definitive ending, not a containment or a delay, but a true conclusion. The infection source is gone and it cannot return. But the cost is high. The night is lost, absorbed into the void, its individual existence ended. The Hollow Knight is dead, finally released from centuries of torment. The kingdom of Hallownest remains in ruins, its inhabitants dead or scattered, its glory a memory. Is this victory? In one sense, yes. The threat is ended, the cycle is broken, the future is freed from the Radiance's shadow. Whatever comes next will not be shaped by her infection, her dreams, her consuming light. But in another sense, the victory is hollow, appropriately enough. Nothing is restored, nothing is healed, nothing is made right. The dead remain dead, the ruined remains ruined, the lost remains lost. The victory prevents future harm but does not repair past damage. Perhaps this is the only kind of victory possible in a world like Hallownest. Perhaps some conflicts can only be ended, not won. Perhaps the best outcome is simply that the suffering stops, that the cycle breaks, that something new becomes possible. The knight's sacrifice makes this possible. By giving up its individual existence, by merging with the void, by becoming something greater and lesser than itself, it creates an ending. Not a happy ending, but an ending nonetheless. And endings, even sad ones, have their own kind of peace. What happens after the true ending? The game doesn't show us, but we can imagine. Hallownest lies quiet, its infection ended, its conflicts resolved. The ruins remain, slowly crumbling, slowly being reclaimed by nature and time. The few survivors, if any exist, must find their own way forward, must build new lives in the shadow of the old kingdom. Hornet survives, presumably. She was not in the Black Egg Temple during the final battle, was not consumed by the void or destroyed by the radiance. She remains, the last child of the Pale King, the guardian of secrets that no longer need guarding. What does she do now? Does she stay in Hallownest, watching over the ruins? Does she leave, seeking new purposes in distant lands? Does she mourn the knight, her half-sibling, who sacrificed everything to end the conflict? The game doesn't say, leaving her fate to imagination. The void remains, of course. It existed before Hallownest and will exist after. The abyss still pools with darkness, still holds the remains of countless vessels, still pulses with ancient patient power. Whatever the void is, whatever consciousness it possesses, it continues. And somewhere, in the darkness, something that was once the night may still exist. Not as an individual, not as a person, but as part of something larger. The void that consumed it, that it became part of, carries something of what it was. In this sense, the night achieves a kind of immortality, a continued existence beyond individual identity. The Pale King's origins remain one of Hollow Knight's greatest mysteries. We know he was a worm, a being of immense size and power, who came from somewhere beyond Hallownest, but where and why? Worms, in the world of Hollow Knight, are ancient beings of tremendous power. They are not gods in the traditional sense, but they are close, entities whose very presence transforms the world around them. The Pale King was one such being, perhaps the last of his kind. When the Pale King arrived in the land that would become Hallownest, he shed his worm form. This transformation was not merely physical, it was a fundamental change in nature. The worm died, in a sense, and the Pale King was born from its remains. The cast-off shell of the worm can still be found in the kingdom's edge, a massive structure that dwarfs everything around it. This shell is a reminder of what the Pale King was, of the power he sacrificed to become something new. Why did he make this sacrifice? What did he hope to gain? Some speculate that the Pale King was fleeing something, that his arrival in Hallownest was an escape rather than a conquest. Others believe he was drawn by the void, by the power that pooled in the abyss, by potential that he sensed and wanted to harness. The truth may never be known. The White Lady is as mysterious as her husband, a higher being whose nature and origins are never fully explained. She's associated with roots, with growth, with the endless proliferation of life. But what is she exactly? The White Lady appears as a massive, pale figure bound by roots, her form suggesting both plant and animal, both growth and decay. She has chosen to bind herself, to prevent further reproduction, to ensure that no more vessels are created. This self-imposed imprisonment speaks to guilt, to grief, to a desire to prevent further tragedy. Her relationship with the Pale King was complex. They were partners in the creation of Hallownest, in the awakening of the bugs, in the desperate plan to contain the radiance. But they were also different in fundamental ways: light and growth, thought and fertility, cold reason and warm life. The White Lady's grief for her children, the vessels, seems genuine. She speaks of them with something like love, something like sorrow. Unlike the Pale King, who saw them as tools, she may have seen them as children, may have mourned each one that was discarded. Her fate after the kingdom's fall is unclear. She remains in her gardens, bound by roots, waiting for something or nothing. Perhaps she waits for the night, for the child who escaped, for the vessel who might finally end the tragedy she helped create. Is the void conscious? Does it have will, desire, purpose? These questions are central to understanding the vessels and their nature. The void is often described as emptiness, as absence, as the negation of self. But it also acts, responds, takes form. The shades in the abyss attack intruders. The void sea seems to pulse with something like life. The siblings, in the true ending, emerge to help defeat the radiance. Some interpret these behaviours as purely mechanical, responses without awareness, actions without intention. The void reacts to stimuli but doesn't think, moves but doesn't choose, exists but doesn't live. Others see evidence of a collective consciousness, a vast awareness that encompasses all void beings. The siblings' coordinated attack on the radiance suggests communication, cooperation, shared purpose. The Void Heart's effect on the shades suggests recognition, kinship, something like family. The truth may be somewhere between these interpretations. The void may have a form of consciousness that doesn't map onto human or bug understanding, an awareness that is neither individual nor collective, neither present nor absent. It may be something genuinely alien, beyond our categories and concepts. We've told this story largely from the perspective of Hallownest and its inhabitants. But what about the Radiance? What is her perspective on these events? The Radiance was worshipped for eons, her light sustaining the Moth tribe, her dreams connecting all who accepted her. She was a god, ancient and powerful, the centre of a world that revolved around her brilliance. Then the Pale King came, and everything changed. Her worshippers forgot her, turned to a new light, abandoned the goddess who had sustained them. She didn't just lose followers, she lost herself, her power tied to remembrance, her existence dependent on being known. From the Radiance's perspective, she is the victim. She was betrayed, abandoned, left to fade into nothing. Her infection is not aggression but self-defense, an attempt to reclaim what was stolen, to remind the world of her existence. This doesn't make the infection less terrible, doesn't excuse the suffering it causes. But it adds complexity to the conflict, suggests that there are no pure villains, only beings acting according to their natures, only gods whose virtues become vices when circumstances change. Hollow Knight leaves many questions unanswered, mysteries that invite speculation and interpretation. Let's consider some of these questions as we continue our journey towards sleep. What happened to the Pale King? Did he die? Flee? Transcend? The White Palace exists in the dream realm, suggesting that he may have retreated into dreams, into memory, into a form of existence beyond physical reality. But certainty is impossible. What is the knight's ultimate fate? Even in the true ending, the knight's individual existence seems to end, absorbed into the void, merged with something greater. Is this death? Transformation? Transcendence? The game doesn't say. Are there other kingdoms beyond Hallownest? The world seems larger than what we see, with references to distant lands and other civilizations. What stories are unfolding in these places? What gods and conflicts shape their histories? What will happen to Hallownest now? With the Radiance defeated, will the kingdom recover? Will new inhabitants arrive? Will the ruins be reclaimed, rebuilt, remembered? Or will Hallownest fade into complete oblivion, forgotten by a world that moves on? These questions have no definitive answers, and that's part of their appeal. They invite imagination, speculation, the creation of personal interpretations. The lore of Hollow Knight is rich enough to support many readings, many theories, many ways of understanding its mysteries. Hallownest extends deep beneath the surface, encompassing multiple distinct regions. The Forgotten Crossroads serve as a central hub, connecting the various areas. The Green Path is lush with plant life, home to creatures adapted to its verdant environment. The fungal wastes are dominated by fungal growths and the Mantis tribe. The City of Tears is Hallownest's capital, a grand metropolis where rain falls eternally from the lake above. Here the kingdom's greatest achievements are on display. Architecture, art, culture, all the fruits of civilization. But the city is also empty now, its inhabitants dead or infected, its grandeur turned to melancholy. The Crystal Peak glitters with valuable minerals, once mined by workers who have long since succumbed to the infection. The resting grounds hold the graves of Hallownest's dead, watched over by spirits and memories. The royal waterways carry the kingdom's waste, home to creatures that thrive in filth. Deepnest is a realm of darkness and spiders, ruled by Hera before she became a dreamer. The ancient basin lies near the abyss, transitional zone between the kingdom above and the darkness below, and the abyss itself, birthplace of the vessels, waits at the very bottom, patient and eternal. The infection that the vessels were created to stop spread throughout Hallownest, touching every region, every community, every aspect of life. Understanding its spread helps us understand the desperation that drove the Pale King's plan. The infection began in dreams, in the sleeping minds of bugs who had forgotten the radiance. It manifested as strange thoughts, as impulses that didn't belong, as a creeping orange presence at the edges of consciousness. At first it was subtle, easily dismissed, barely noticeable, but it grew. The infected began to change, their eyes taking on an orange glow, their behaviour becoming erratic and violent. They attacked friends and family, driven by the Radiance's will, unable to resist her influence. Communities that had lived in peace for generations tore themselves apart. The fully infected became husks, their individual identities burned away entirely. These husks still moved, still fought, still existed in some sense, but they were no longer themselves. They were extensions of the Radiance, soldiers in her war against the kingdom that had forgotten her. The infection spread through dreams, through contact, through the very air of Hallownest. Quarantine was attempted but failed. Treatments were developed but proved ineffective. The kingdom's best minds worked on the problem, but none could find a solution. Only the Pale King's desperate plan offered hope. Only the vessels with their void nature could potentially contain the Radiance and end the infection. The cost was terrible, but the alternative was the complete destruction of everything Hallownest had built. The three dreamers who maintain the seals on the Black Egg Temple each have their own story, their own reasons for accepting eternal sleep. Their sacrifices are essential to understanding the vessel's story. Monomon the teacher was Hallownest's greatest scholar, a being devoted to knowledge and its preservation. She created the Teacher's Archives, a repository of learning that would survive even the kingdom's fall. Her students, the Quirrell among them, carried her teachings into the world. Monomon agreed to become a dreamer because she believed in the plan, believed that containing the radiance was necessary, believed that her sacrifice would protect everything she had built. She entered her eternal sleep surrounded by her archives, her knowledge preserved even as her consciousness faded. Lurien the Watcher was devoted to the Pale King with an intensity that bordered on worship. He watched over the City of Tears from his spire, maintaining vigilance even when there was nothing to watch for. His loyalty was absolute, unquestioning, perhaps unhealthy. Lurien agreed to become a dreamer because the Pale King asked him to. No other reason was necessary. His sacrifice was an act of devotion, a final service to the king he loved. He entered his eternal sleep still watching, still loyal, still devoted. Hera the Beast was Queen of Deepnest, a realm that existed uneasily within Hallownest's borders. She was powerful, independent, not naturally inclined to serve the Pale King's purposes. Her agreement to become a dreamer required a bargain. The price was a child. Hera wanted an heir, a daughter to continue her line and rule Deepnest after her. The Pale King agreed, and from their union came Hornet. Hera entered her eternal sleep knowing that her daughter would live, would rule, would carry on what she had built. Despite the sealing of the radiance, Hallownest did not survive. The kingdom fell slowly and inexorably into ruin and silence. Understanding this fall helps us understand the ultimate failure of the Pale King's plan. The Pale King's withdrawal was the beginning of the end. Without his guidance, the kingdom's institutions faltered. Decisions that should have been made were delayed or avoided. Problems that should have been solved were allowed to fester. The infection, though contained, was not entirely gone. Some bugs remained partially corrupted, their minds touched by the radiance even after her imprisonment. These individuals spread unease, reminded everyone that the threat was not truly defeated. The void, disturbed by the creation of the vessels, became more active. Creatures emerged from the abyss, beings of living darkness that threatened the kingdom's lower regions. The Pale King's experiments had consequences that extended beyond their intended purpose, and the seals were weakening. Slowly, imperceptibly, the radiance was breaking free. The Hollow Knight's flaw, that tiny spark of consciousness, gave her a foothold. Through that crack she worked, eroded, prepared for her eventual escape. By the time the knight returns to Hallownest, the kingdom is a ruin. The cities are empty, the roads are broken, the inhabitants are dead or infected. What was once a great civilization is now a tomb, a monument to ambition and failure. What is the Pale King's legacy? This question haunts the lore of Hollow Knight, and different characters answer it differently. To some, the Pale King was a saviour, a god who gave bugs consciousness and built a civilization of unprecedented achievement. His gifts of thought and individuality transformed primitive creatures into beings capable of art, science, philosophy. Without him, Hallownest would never have existed. To others, the Pale King was a tyrant, a being who imposed his will on a world that didn't ask for his interference. He displaced the radiance, disrupted ancient patterns, created problems that he then failed to solve. His gifts came with costs that he never acknowledged. To the vessels, the Pale King was a father who was not a father, a creator who was also a destroyer, a god who made them and then threw them away. His legacy to them is existence without purpose, consciousness without acknowledgement, life without love. The knight's journey can be seen as a reckoning with this legacy. It explores the kingdom the Pale King built, confronts the problems he created, ultimately resolves the conflict he started. In doing so, it either continues his work or undoes it, depending on which ending the player achieves. The void in Hollow Knight invites philosophical reflection. What does it mean to be empty? What is the relationship between emptiness and existence? These questions have occupied philosophers for millennia, and the game engages with them in its own way. In Buddhist philosophy, emptiness is not mere nothingness, but the absence of inherent independent existence. All things are empty in the sense that they depend on other things, arise from causes and conditions, have no fixed essence. This emptiness is not negative but liberating, freeing us from attachment to fixed identities. The vessels embody a different kind of emptiness, one designed rather than natural, imposed rather than discovered. They were meant to be empty of consciousness, of will, of self. But this designed emptiness proved impossible to achieve, suggesting that some form of awareness may be inherent in existence itself. The knight's journey can be read as a movement toward a different relationship with emptiness. Rather than being empty by design, it becomes empty by choice, accepting its void nature rather than fighting it. This acceptance is not resignation but integration, not loss but transformation. The true ending represents the ultimate embrace of emptiness. The knight merges with the void, loses its individual identity, becomes part of something larger. Is this death or transcendence, loss or liberation? The game doesn't answer, leaving players to find their own meaning. We often fear darkness, associate it with danger and the unknown, but darkness can also be comforting, restful, peaceful. The darkness of sleep, of closed eyes, of quiet rooms, these are not threatening but soothing. The void in Hollow Knight is dark, but it's not evil. It simply is, a force of nature rather than a malevolent entity. The vessels filled with void are not corrupted by it but defined by it. Their darkness is their nature, not their flaw. As you drift towards sleep, let darkness be your friend. The darkness behind your closed eyes is not emptiness but potential, not absence but presence of a different kind. In darkness, the busy visual world fades and other senses come forward. In darkness, the mind can rest from the constant processing of light and image. The abyss in Hollow Knight is the darkest place in the game, but it's also, in its way, the most peaceful. Here, in the absolute darkness, there are no distractions, no complications, no demands. There is only the void, patient and eternal, waiting for nothing, needing nothing. Let the void's patience be your patience. Let its stillness be your stillness. Let its darkness be the darkness of restful sleep, of peaceful dreams, of the quiet that comes when the day's struggles are done. Endings are often seen as sad, as losses, as things to be avoided. But endings are also gifts, completions, the fulfillment of stories that would otherwise go on forever. The vessel's story ends, one way or another. The knight either takes the Hollow Knight's place, continuing the cycle, or destroys the radiance, breaking it forever. Either way, the story reaches a conclusion, a point where the narrative stops and something else begins. This is the gift of endings. They give meaning to what came before. A story without an ending is just events, one thing after another, signifying nothing. An ending shapes the story, gives it structure, allows us to see it as a whole. Your day is ending now, reaching its natural conclusion. The events of the day, whatever they were, are becoming a completed story, a narrative with beginning, middle, and end. Tomorrow will bring a new story, but tonight, this story is complete. Let the ending of the day be peaceful. Let it be a gift rather than a loss, a completion rather than a termination. The day's struggles are over, the day's challenges are met, the day's story is told. Now there is only rest, only sleep, only the peace that comes with endings. In some philosophies, existence is cyclical, endlessly repeating, returning to the same points again and again. The vessel's story has elements of this, the cycle of infection and containment, the repetition of desperate measures, the return of the night to the kingdom of its birth. But cycles can be broken. The true ending of Hollow Knight breaks the cycle, destroys the radiance, ensures that this particular pattern will not repeat. Something new becomes possible, something that couldn't exist while the cycle continued. Sleep is its own kind of cycle, a daily return to unconsciousness, a nightly journey into dreams, but each sleep is also unique, shaped by the day that preceded it, leading to a tomorrow that has never existed before. The cycle repeats, but it also evolves, changes, moves forward. Tonight's sleep is part of the eternal return of rest and waking, darkness and light, unconsciousness and awareness. But it's also unique. This particular night, this particular rest, this particular journey into dreams, honour both the cycle and the uniqueness, the repetition and the novelty. And now, truly, finally, completely, it is time to rest. The lore of the vessels has been told in full, every aspect has been explored, every theme has been examined, every mystery has been contemplated. The story is complete, the journey is over, the words are done. What remains is silence. What remains is darkness. What remains is the peace that comes when stories end and sleep begins. The night rests now, in whatever form it takes after the ending. The Hollow Knight rests, finally released from centuries of torment. The siblings rest, their brief tragic existences concluded. The radiance rests, her light extinguished, her dreams ended. And you rest too, joining them in the peace of completion, in the quiet of endings, in the darkness that is not emptiness but fullness of a different kind. The void welcomes you, not as a threat, but as a comfort. The darkness embraces you, not as a danger but as a friend. The silence surrounds you, not as absence but as presence of peace. Sleep now, dream now, rest now. The story is told, the journey is complete, the night is here. Good night, dear listener. Good night, weary traveller. Good night, Hollow One. May your dreams be peaceful. May your rest be deep. May you wake refreshed, ready for whatever stories tomorrow brings. Until then, sleep. Until then, rest. Until then, peace. The void is patient. The kingdom is quiet, and you are safe. Good night. The vessels all share certain physical characteristics that mark them as products of the same process. Understanding these characteristics helps us understand what the vessels are and how they function. All vessels are small, roughly the same size as the night. They have pale, shell-like bodies that seem almost ceramic in texture. Their heads are dominated by two large dark eye holes that reveal nothing of what lies within. Two horns extend from their heads, varying slightly in shape between individuals. The vessel's bodies are not flesh in the ordinary sense. They are shells, containers, structures designed to hold the void within. When a vessel is damaged, what leaks out is not blood, but darkness, the void substance that fills them. The vessels can use tools and weapons, can move with agility and purpose, can interact with the world in complex ways. But they do not eat, do not sleep, do not engage in the biological processes that characterize ordinary life. They exist, but they do not live in the conventional sense. The knight's appearance changes slightly over the course of the game, reflecting its growth and development. It obtains a cloak, upgrades its nail, acquires charms that modify its abilities, but its fundamental nature remains the same, a small, pale shell filled with darkness. When the knight dies, it leaves behind a shade, a being of pure void that guards the location of death. This shade must be defeated to recover lost Geo and restore the knight's soul meter. But what is the shade exactly? The shade represents the void within the knight, temporarily separated from its shell. When the knight dies, its container is broken, and the darkness within escapes. This darkness takes form, becomes hostile, guards what was lost. The shade's hostility is interesting. Why would the knight's own void nature attack it? Perhaps the shade represents aspects of the knight that it normally suppresses, darkness that is contained but not controlled. Perhaps death releases these suppressed elements, allowing them to act independently. The shade also connects to the broader void mythology. The abyss is full of shades, the remnants of dead, vessels, beings of darkness that attack anything that enters their domain. The knight's shade is part of this collective, connected to the greater void, even while bound to an individual shell. Obtaining the void heart changes the knight's relationship with its shade. The two become one, integrated rather than separated. The knight no longer leaves a shade when it dies, having fully accepted and incorporated its void nature. The knight develops several abilities that draw on its void nature. These abilities represent the knight learning to use what it is, to channel the darkness within for practical purposes. The Shade Cloak is perhaps the most significant void ability. It allows the knight to dash through enemies and hazards, becoming briefly intangible, passing through what would otherwise be solid. This ability represents the knight embracing its nature as absence, as emptiness, as something that can pass through the world without being touched by it. The Abyss Shriek is a powerful spell that channels void energy into a devastating attack. The knight screams and darkness erupts from it, damaging everything nearby. This ability represents the knight's connection to the abyss, its ability to call upon the collective power of the void. The void heart, obtained in the abyss after confronting the knight's origins, represents full integration of the void nature. With this charm equipped, the knight's shade becomes part of it. The siblings in the abyss become peaceful, and the true ending becomes possible. These abilities suggest that the void is not merely emptiness, but a source of power. The knight learns to use this power to shape it, to make it serve its purposes. In doing so, it becomes more than an empty shell. It becomes a being that contains and controls darkness. The countless vessels who were deemed imperfect and discarded in the abyss represent one of the game's greatest tragedies. These were children, in some sense, beings who were created and then destroyed because they failed to meet an impossible standard. Most of the siblings died in the abyss, consumed by the void that birthed them. Their bodies litter the darkness, small pale shells that will never move again. The night passes them constantly during its exploration of the abyss, a reminder of how many were sacrificed. Some siblings survived as shades, beings of void that attack the night when encountered. These shades are hostile, aggressive, seemingly mindless. But are they truly without consciousness? Or are they angry, resentful, attacking the sibling who escaped when they could not? The void heart changes the sibling's behaviour. With it equipped, the shades in the abyss become peaceful, no longer attacking the night. They seem to recognise it as one of them, as family, as a being that has accepted what they all share. This piece suggests that the siblings retain some form of awareness, some ability to recognise and respond to kinship. In the true ending, the siblings play a crucial role. They emerge from the night, joining in the final assault on the Radiance, helping to drag her down into the void. In this moment, the discarded children become instruments of victory. Their deaths, their suffering, their brief and tragic existences finally serve a purpose. They help destroy the god who caused so much suffering, and in doing so, they achieve a kind of redemption. The Hollow Knight, the chosen vessel, differs from its siblings in several ways. It is larger, more developed, more clearly designed for combat. These differences reflect its special status, its selection as the one who would contain the Radiance. The Hollow Knight wears armour, carries a nail of exceptional size and quality, moves with trained precision. It was raised in the palace, trained by the Pale King himself, prepared for its destiny in ways that the other vessels were not. But the Hollow Knight also bears the marks of its torment. Its shell is cracked, leaking infection. Its movements are erratic, interrupted by spasms of pain. Its attacks are powerful but uncontrolled, the skills of a warrior degraded by centuries of suffering. The Hollow Knight's self-harm during the boss fight is particularly significant. It stabs itself, trying to destroy the Radiance within, trying to end its own existence. This behaviour suggests consciousness, will, the ability to choose death over continued torment. A truly hollow being would not make such a choice. The Hollow Knight's design tells a story of promise and failure, of a being created for greatness that could not achieve it, of a child raised to be a saviour who became a prisoner instead. Imagine Hallownest at peace, not the false peace of containment, not the desperate peace of struggle, but true peace, the peace that comes after endings. The City of Tears still stands, its rain still falling, its streets still empty. But the emptiness is different now. It's not the emptiness of death and infection, but the emptiness of completion, of stories told, of conflicts resolved. The rain falls gently, as it always has, as it always will. It doesn't know about gods and vessels, about infection and sacrifice. It simply falls, following the laws of its nature, creating the eternal gentle sound that defines this place. Walk through the empty streets in your imagination. Feel the rain on your shell, hear it pattering on stone. Watch it run in rivulets toward drains that still function after all these years. There's no danger here, no enemies, no challenges. Just the rain and the quiet and the peace. The resting grounds are aptly named now. The dead of Hallownest lie here, finally at rest, no longer threatened by infection or disturbance. The spirits that once wandered have found their peace, have moved on to whatever comes after. The graves are quiet, the monuments are still, the air is calm. This is a place of endings, of conclusions, of the peace that comes when struggles cease. The dead don't need anything anymore. They simply rest, Sit among the graves in your imagination. Feel the stillness, the quiet, the sense of completion. The beings buried here lived their lives, faced their challenges, met their ends. Their stories are over, and there's peace in that. The resting grounds remind us that all things end, all struggles conclude, all conflicts resolve, all stories reach their final pages. This is not sad but natural, not tragic but inevitable. Endings are part of existence, and accepting them is part of wisdom. Even the abyss is peaceful now, in its own dark way. The void still pools here, still fills the depths with primordial darkness. But the desperate energy of the vessel's creation is gone. The frantic struggle of escape is over. The tragedy has concluded. The siblings rest here, what remains of them. Their shades no longer attack, no longer rage against their fate. They have found peace, or nothing like it, acceptance of what they are and what happened to them. Descend into the abyss in your imagination. Feel the darkness wrap around you, not threatening but embracing. The void is patient, eternal, unconcerned with the struggles of gods and mortals. It simply is, as it always has been, as it always will be. The lighthouse remains dark, its purpose fulfilled, its light no longer needed. The platforms and structures the Pale King built are silent, monuments to ambition and desperation. The sea of void stretches endlessly, dark and calm and peaceful. The knight's nail is more than a weapon. It is an extension of its will, a tool through which it interacts with the world. The nail begins simple, unadorned, barely adequate for the challenges ahead, but it can be upgraded, strengthened, transformed into something worthy of facing gods. Each upgrade represents growth, not just in power, but in purpose. The knight becomes more capable of fulfilling whatever destiny awaits it. The charms the knight collects throughout its journey modify its abilities in countless ways. Some enhance combat, making attacks stronger or faster. Some improve exploration, allowing the knight to reach places it couldn't before. Some connect to the void, deepening the knight's relationship with its own nature. These charms are the remnants of Hallownest's civilization, tools and trinkets left behind by bugs who no longer need them. The knight collects them, uses them, carries forward the legacy of a dead kingdom. The grim troop represents something outside Hallownest's tragedy, a travelling circus of nightmare creatures drawn by the kingdom's fall. Their ritual, the ritual of the nightmare flame, offers another perspective on cycles and endings. The Nightmare King Grim is ancient, perhaps as old as the Radiance, a being of fire and fear who exists through an endless cycle of death and rebirth. The knight can participate in this ritual, can help perpetuate the cycle, or can end it by banishing the troop. This choice mirrors the larger choice about the Radiance: continue the cycle or break it forever. The Grim Troop storyline suggests that Hallownest's tragedy is not unique, that other ancient powers exist, that the world is full of gods and rituals and cycles beyond counting. The Godmaster content expands on the theme of divinity, presenting a pantheon of bosses as gods to be challenged and overcome. The God Seeker, a being devoted to finding and worshipping the most powerful god, has come to Hallownest seeking worthy deities. She finds the night, finds the void, finds something that transcends her understanding of divinity. The pantheons challenge the knight to face every boss in sequence, culminating in battles against the most powerful beings in Hallownest. Completing these challenges unlocks additional endings, additional perspectives on the conflict between void and light. The Godmaster content suggests that the night's power rivals or exceeds that of the gods themselves, that the void it carries is a force beyond even divine comprehension. The world of Hollow Knight extends beyond what we see in the game. References to other lands, other kingdoms, other civilizations suggest a larger world with its own stories and tragedies. Hallownest is not the only kingdom to rise and fall, not the only civilization to grapple with gods and infections and desperate measures. The night came from somewhere beyond Hallownest, wandered in wastelands we never see, experienced things we can only imagine. Other vessels may have escaped, may have found their way to distant lands, maybe living their own stories in places we'll never visit. The world is vast, and Hallownest is just one small part of it. This vastness is comforting in its way. It suggests that endings are not absolute, that stories continue beyond what we see, that the universe is too large for any single tragedy to define it. Hallownest fell, but other kingdoms stand. The radiance was destroyed, but other gods remain. The night story ended, but other stories continue. The music of Hollow Knight deserves special mention. Christopher Larkin's score is haunting and beautiful, perfectly capturing the melancholy grandeur of the ruined kingdom. Each area has its own theme, its own mood, its own musical identity. The City of Tears has its gentle piano, evoking rain and loss and quiet dignity. Greenpath has its organic sounds, suggesting growth and life amid the decay. The Abyss has its deep, resonant tones, conveying the weight and patience of primordial darkness. The boss themes are intense and memorable, driving the action while maintaining the game's distinctive atmosphere. The Hollow Knight's theme is particularly powerful, combining tragedy and determination in equal measure. The Radiance's theme blazes with divine fury, appropriate for a god finally unleashed after centuries of imprisonment. Let this music play in your imagination as you drift towards sleep. Let the gentle melodies of the quieter areas wash over you, carrying you toward rest. The music of Hollow Knight is designed to evoke emotion, to create atmosphere, to draw players into its world. Let it draw you now into the world of sleep, into the peaceful darkness that awaits. The art style of Hollow Knight is distinctive and beautiful, combining hand-drawn characters with atmospheric backgrounds to create a world that feels both alien and familiar. The bugs of Hallownest are stylized but expressive, conveying personality and emotion through simple designs. The environments are detailed and evocative, telling stories through visual design alone. The use of light and shadow is particularly effective. Hallownest is a dark world, lit by bioluminescence and ancient lamps, by the glow of infection and the pale light of the king. This darkness creates atmosphere, makes the moments of brightness more meaningful, emphasizes the themes of light and void that run through the story. The animation brings the world to life, giving weight and personality to every creature. The knight's movements are precise and responsive, conveying competence and determination. The enemies move in ways that suggest their natures, from the mindless shambling of husks to the deliberate menace of hunters. The bosses are animated with particular care, their attacks telegraphed clearly while remaining threatening and impressive. This visual beauty is part of what makes Hollow Knight so memorable. The world feels real, feels lived in, feels like a place that existed before the night arrived and will continue to exist after it leaves. This sense of reality makes the tragedy more affecting, the beauty more poignant, the story more meaningful. And now, truly, the story is complete. we've explored every aspect of the vessel's lore, from their creation to their fate, from the Pale King's desperation to the Knight's determination. We have considered themes of identity and emptiness, of cycles and endings, of light and darkness. We have walked through the ruins of Hallownest and descended into the depths of the abyss. What remains is rest. What remains is peace. What remains is the gentle surrender to sleep that comes when stories are told and journeys are complete. The vessel's tragedy is over, resolved one way or another. The Knight's journey is done, its purpose fulfilled or abandoned. The kingdom of Hallownest sleeps, and so can you. Let the darkness embrace you. Let the silence comfort you. Let the peace of ending settle over you like a blanket. The void is patient, and so is sleep. It will come when you're ready, will take you gently into dreams, will hold you safe until morning. Good night, traveller. Good night, dreamer. Good night, little ghost. The story is told. The kingdom is quiet, and you are ready for rest. No cost too great, no mind to think, no will to break, no voice to cry suffering. Born of God and void, you are the vessel, you are the hollow night, and now you rest. Sleep well. The abyss remembers you. The void welcomes you home. The story of the vessels will endure long after Hallownest crumbles to dust. It will be remembered by those who played this game, who felt the weight of its tragedy, who carried its lessons into their own lives. The vessels teach us about the cost of desperation, about the impossibility of true emptiness, about the value of every conscious being. They teach us that even those created as tools can become persons, that even those designed to be hollow can find meaning. And they teach us that endings, however sad, bring their own kind of peace. The cycle is broken, the infection is ended, the vessels rest at last, and so do you. Good night.